3 months after Judge Lauren's courtroom exposed Monica Hale's operation, woman who once called herself a proud supporter of veterans stood inside a federal courthouse, facing criminal charges that could destroy the rest of her life. And by then, the case had become national news. Television networks covered it non-stop. Veteran organizations demanded accountability. Former tenants from multiple states began coming forward with horrifyingly similar stories. What investigators uncovered was far worse than anyone first imagined. The original 23 veteran victims quickly became 29. Then more names surfaced. The investigation revealed a carefully organized system designed to target struggling veterans the moment they became financially vulnerable. Court documents showed that Monica and her brother, Richard Hale, had collected more than $600,000 in fraudulent repair claims over 5 years. Yet actual repair expenses totaled barely $30,000. The numbers alone were devastating. But the text messages investigators uncovered were even worse because they proved intent. Message after message revealed Monica and Richard discussing which tenants appeared easiest to manipulate, which veterans suffered from PTSD, which elderly tenants lacked family support, which disabled residents would struggle to fight back legally. The courtroom during the criminal trial felt nothing like the confident atmosphere Monica once enjoyed in civil court. Now she sat at the defense table looking exhausted and hollow. No designer confidence remained, no polished image, no patriotic branding, only fear. Daniel Harper attended every day of the trial. He sat quietly beside Victor Ramirez and several other veterans who had chosen to testify against Monica's operation. Emily's letter remained inside his jacket pocket every single day, still folded carefully, still protected, still carrying the final words of a daughter who had seen the truth before anyone else. The prosecution presented evidence for nearly 2 weeks: financial audits, fraudulent invoices, bank transfers, eviction records, witness testimony from veterans who described losing everything after Monica's fabricated repair charges buried them in debt. One veteran described sleeping beneath a highway bridge after his eviction. Another spoke about losing custody of his son because homelessness made him appear unstable in family court. An elderly former Marine broke down completely while describing how Monica's collection agency calls pushed his wife into severe depression before her death. And throughout every testimony, Monica sat silently, sometimes staring down at the table, sometimes glancing nervously toward the jury. But the damage was already done. Then came the messages between Monica and Richard. The prosecutor read them aloud one by one. Target older veterans, less likely to fight. This one's medical records show PTSD. Document every little wall mark. Push collections fast before they get legal help. Gasps filled the courtroom repeatedly. Several jurors visibly shook their heads. Daniel sat frozen during much of the trial, not because he felt victory, but because every new testimony reminded him of Emily. How sick she had been, how alone she must have felt, how terrified she probably was after being forced out while fighting cancer. And yet, somehow, even while dying, she had still been thinking about protecting him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom became completely silent. The foreperson stood slowly. "We find the defendant guilty." Monica closed her eyes immediately. "Guilty on charges of fraud." Another pause. "Guilty on charges of elder abuse." Another. "Guilty on charges of conspiracy." Another. "Guilty on charges of financial exploitation." One by one, the verdicts continued. 18 guilty counts. The judge overseeing the criminal trial spoke firmly during sentencing. "You deliberately targeted individuals who had already sacrificed for this country." The courtroom remained silent. "You exploited disability, grief, trauma, and isolation for financial gain." Monica stared blankly ahead. "This court finds your conduct calculated, predatory, and morally reprehensible." Then the sentence came. 8 years in federal prison for Monica Hale, 5 years for Richard Hale, full restitution ordered to every verified victim, and a permanent prohibition from operating housing businesses in the future. Daniel listened quietly as the sentence was read, but when officers placed handcuffs on Monica, he felt no triumph, no celebration, no revenge, only exhaustion and grief. Because prison time could never bring Emily back. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around the veterans who had testified. Cameras flashed non-stop. Microphones stretched through the crowd. But Daniel said very little. Only one sentence. "My daughter told the truth." That night, Daniel returned to the Veterans Housing Center, where he had been staying since Judge Lawrence' ruling months earlier. And for the first time in years, he slept indoors without fear of losing everything again. The Transition Center director, Angela Morris, had personally helped him settle into a small, private room shortly after the original courtroom hearing. A real bed, clean clothes, regular meals, medical assistance. Things many people took for granted suddenly felt life-changing to Daniel. Within weeks, the Department of Veterans Affairs finally processed his delayed benefits claim after years of paperwork problems. 18 months of unpaid benefits were released all at once, more than $34,000 deposited into an account counselors helped him open. Combined with the judgment awarded by Judge Lawrence, Daniel suddenly had financial stability for the first time in years. But money wasn't what truly changed his life. People did. Victor Ramirez began visiting several times each week. The two veterans spent hours talking about military service, trauma, grief, and the strange pain of being betrayed by someone who pretended to support veterans publicly while secretly exploiting them. Soon, more former tenants began finding Daniel after seeing the case on television. Some arrived carrying eviction papers, others brought photographs. One woman carried a binder documenting 3 years of harassment from Monica's company. They started meeting every Thursday evening at the Veterans Center. At first, there were 12 people, then 17, then more than 30. Eventually, someone suggested a name for the group. Emily's guardian named after the woman whose final letter exposed the entire operation. Daniel initially resisted speaking publicly. He hated cameras, hated attention. But veteran organizations across the country began inviting him to share his story. Housing advocacy groups asked him to testify before lawmakers. Military transition programs requested presentations, warning newly discharged veterans about predatory landlords and financial scams. Slowly, Daniel agreed, not for himself, for Emily. He carried her letter to every event. Sometimes he read small portions aloud. Other times he simply held it silently while speaking. And every time he finished, veterans approached him afterward with tears in their eyes. Many admitted they had experienced similar exploitation, but felt too ashamed to report it. Within months, several states introduced legislation increasing oversight of housing companies specifically targeting veterans and elderly tenants. News programs began referring to the changes informally as Emily's Law. 6 months after the criminal sentencing, Daniel purchased a small mobile home in a quiet, veteran-owned community outside the city. It wasn't large, barely 600 square feet, but it belonged to him. No landlord, no threats, no eviction notices taped to the door. Inside the living room, Daniel created a memorial wall dedicated to Emily. Her military portrait hung at the center. Beside it rested the framed letter that changed everything. Below them sat the Purple Heart medal she earned but never lived long enough to receive publicly. Every morning, Daniel stood quietly before that wall and talked to his daughter. He told her about the veterans receiving help, the policies changing across the country, the people now protected because she chose to speak before it was too late. And deep down, he hoped somehow she could hear him.